Welcome back, SPC Nation. Before we get into today's episode of the Second Print Comics Podcast, I got to stop you for 1 second and tell you to head over to our brand new sponsors website. The website is foxandsons.com, F-O-X, the letter N, S-O-N-S.com. What do? They make fantastic coffee beans, and they deliver them right to your door. He doesn't make the beans, let's be honest. He sources them from amazing, incredible sources, but he gets them right to your door, I'll tell you that, and they're fantastic. I get these 2-pound bags delivered to my house every single month. And right now, Steven is offering a special deal, $4 off any subscription to these 2-pound bags, or you can use a little SPC discount. For any order over $25, you'll get a 15% discount by using discount code SecondPrintPod. You got to spell it all out, that's SecondPrintPod, to get yourself 15% off your order over at foxandsons.com. Check it out.
Am I supposed to intro the show?
Are we doing the Spider-Man thing? See,
you
guys, this is why you need to really subscribe to our YouTube channel. I want to say youtube.com/secondprintpod. It's not that, because we need to get to 1,000 subscribers before we can make our own URL. If you did, you would have seen us hilariously queuing each other to start the show. But otherwise, if for the audio people, it's just awkward silence. So that's why you got to go check out the video, friends.
You see, you got to be with us in the moment on all platforms.
See, Remso and I talk so little off the show that we don't even talk about who's going to start the show until the show's already started. But my theory is it's your issue today. It's your suggestion, so you should start the show. But it's
my
already
circus.
Late, so
yeah, it's my circus. It's my monkeys. It's my clowns. I know that we covered a Spider-Man comic the last time we did Reissued, but who's ever complained about more Spider-Man, especially as we've got Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse in theaters right now? I thought that there was probably no better time to go ahead and jump into today's issue, which is one that I've had on the docket for a while. I didn't synchronize it for this one particularly, but the timing just happened to be right, which is also really ironic because I thought this movie was going to come out the following week. I thought it was going to come out the same week as Flash. So when I found out that it was coming out when it did, immediately bought tickets, caught the first showing. Got to see my boys, Ben Reilly, the Scarlet Spider, Spider-Man 2099, Miguel O'Hara on the big
Spoiler
screen.
Alert. Spoiler.
Well,
I mean, I knew about
every commercial. It's in
I knew
every
about
commercial.
2099. I didn't know about Ben Reilly, but I'm not exactly. I'm still gonna see it. You haven't
Voiced by Andy Samberg, which I didn't see coming. But yeah, that's right. Today we are covering the first origin issue of Spider-Man 2099 today. Before we go ahead and do that, Mark, you've got a case, you've got a tale from the fuck it pile this weekend because you're taking a break from Case of the Runs to go ahead and dive into a stack of books that you just kind of come across. And the one that you picked out actually kind of surprised me because I didn't think that this would be one that you'd want to actually cover, but it definitely embodies the fuck it pile mentality.
I mean, the whole point, this is a Patreon show that by the time most of you hear this, you will already be released. But I'm going to be reviewing Thunderstrike #1. Now, I don't know how deep I want to go into this here because I'm going to go very deep into it on that show itself. But to answer your question, I don't want to cover this, Remso. That's kind of the point of the fucking pile, is that it's stuff I would never really force myself to read were it not for my patrons. So I'm saving us all. Well, not all. I'm not saving me. I'm saving everyone else the trouble of actually reading some of this stuff and, giving my short little thoughts on it. But this is an interesting one because I actually, this is my own issue. Like the fucking pile is an actual box of comics that for whatever reason,
actual pile of comics, you just kind of were like, fuck it. And you threw it together.
It's a real pile of comics. It's a real box that when I went back to my vault in Connecticut, where most of my comics are, and I was very meticulous about bagging and boarding when I was a kid. Like every single book I got, I guess, except not all of them. Apparently, I always bagged and board. But when I went back to Connecticut, there was one box that just everything was just in there. It was almost like I just said, fuck it, throw them in here and didn't bag and board them. So I don't know. I'm trying to think back. Maybe there was certain books that I unbagged and then just stuffed them into a box for whatever reason. I don't really remember, but for whatever reason, that you actually were the one that dubbed it the fucking pile. So since then, I've been slowly but surely picking little, I guess you could call them gems of some kind, pebbles, if you will, out of the fucking pile and dive into them. This is okay. I want you to guess something for me right now. Thunderstrike #1 from, let's see, what year is it? I want to say it's 93.
93.
93, June 1993. There is nothing special about this issue in terms of length. Let me see. In terms of length, oh, it is. Okay, this is a double-sized issue, 46 pages. It's actually a big one, including the ads. And a slightly, I'm covering it up so you don't see the price, a slightly sort of glossy, I'm trying to get the camera, glossiness in the cover there on the lightning, as you can see. So what do you think the cover price of this one is? 93.
175.
295.
295. Wow.
Because the double issue, I think, more so than the shiny.
And the paper, they really didn't do well. Marvel was starting to do that. That's when everyone was getting mad because they were making the big, stockier, glossier covers at the time.
Yeah, and then they always tack on a buck and say, "Hey, look, we made your cover shine. All right, kid."
I tried to get rid of that comic. I've got the exact same issue, and like 2 years ago, we tried to do a thing where it was like, "Hey, leave a 5-star rating review on Patreon. Send me your review, and I will send you this issue of Thunderstrike," and it just went silent the entire time.
Is this worth more or less than $2.95 today?
It wasn't worth somebody literally leaving a 5-star review. I've got a funny story.
I'll leave you one if you don't bring it to my house.
Yeah, everyone was just like, "Don't do it." I've got a funny story about how I came up with the term "fuck it pile." So my brother and I, and all our friends that we would collect comic books with, my brother and I strategically put a pile of comics together between both of our collections. And this pile was called the trade pile. So if we had a friend come over, we went to a friend's house and we wanted to trade comic books, as we would, every comic that was in that box was basically fair game. And the idea was it would always be a 1-to-1 thing. So that way it didn't matter if, he took 5 out and traded or whatever. Me and him would always make sure that we got an equal amount of comic books back and put in the pile as well. So it was kind of like, the free banking of comic books. And at one point, my parents were cleaning out a closet. My brother and I had kind of pissed them off for some reason. I don't know if it was my father or my mother, but they were just like, "Move your fucking pile out of the closet." And we weren't.
So it actually came from a parent.
Yeah, it actually came from one of my parents. And I don't remember my brother and I being necessarily scared of it. We were more like, "Did they call it a fuck it pile? We're going to call it that from now on." And thus, the fuck it pile was born.
So little did you know that back then your parents were actually naming a segment on your future podcast that you host with a former libertarian podcaster who would then assume that name.
The world is a uncanny, astonishing, amazing, and spectacular place.
I'll do an extended version of this when I do the actual show. Would you like to hear a Thunderstrike origin story in 30 seconds or less?
Yes.
When Thor lived on Earth as Donald Blake, he gained a best friend. That best friend was Eric Masterson. For some reason, this human Eric Masterson tried to help him battle, I forget who, some villain or another, and was about to die when Thor merged his body with Eric Masterson and essentially became one with him, letting Eric Masterson sometimes turn into Thor. Until later, they were separated and became his own character, Thunderstrike, after Thor gave him a hammer called Thunderstrike. He then assumed the name of Thunderstrike because he's not that original. And later, we find out, thanks to Donny Cates, that Eric Masterson was made up by Odin and never really existed.
What the fuck? That happened?
Yeah, that was recent. That was a very recent Thor and Donny Cates. It was a thing where like Eric Masterson was this sort of like invented thing to like.
He had a kid though. He had a son.
That was all magic. That was all Odin magic.
I never collected Thunderstrike apart from that one
I
issue.
did.
I have
Remso, this is not the only issue in the pile, Remso. I have a whole run. I was like, this is like one of my books at the time.
I liked him when he was Thor, and it was the Mighty Thor title where Eric Masterson was Thor. That's where I actually get like a lot of my like classic Thor stories, because I never collected Thor as a single title, except I got like 30 issues of Mighty Thor that all had Eric Masterson as Thor at the time, and I really liked it.
Yeah, so basically at one point in the 90s here, there was Thor, and then there was Thunderstrike Thor, who was also Thor. He had the exact same powers as Thor, basically, but he's Thunderstrike, Eric Masterson. And there was also Beta Ray Bill and, whatever else.
Damn.
Good times. Anyway, speaking of the early 90s, we're going to talk about something else that came out in the early 90s.
Maybe the same year. So all that and more, patreon.com/secondprintpod. Spider-Man 2099 was actually the first Spider-Man comic I was ever given. I don't remember who gave it to me. I just remember one day I was given like a stack of comics from the 90s. One of them was a Green Lantern book. One of them was a Batman book. And then I got like 4 or 5 issues of Spider-Man 2099. And I just remember looking at this thinking, oh, this is going to be like the Spider-Man Unlimited cartoon, which came out around 1998, 1999, because it takes place in the future. He's got this crazy dark blue costume with the web cape and stuff like that. It's obviously just like that cartoon. No, Spider-Man 2099 is way more hardcore. It doesn't even have Peter Parker. And little did I know that it was in this self-contained universe of Marvel comics in the future. And to this day, the 2099 verse is still considered Marvel canon. So
what's going to happen when we actually get to 2099 and they still have all the same characters that, I mean, you and I may not be, on this material plane at the time. I'd like to think I might be one old motherfucker though. Be
Elon Musk's
119.
Neuralink is like keeping us alive.
We're just two microchips you can put in your computer and tell us to talk about comics.
That's a sad thought.
We could be avatars, just like Miguel O'Hara has.
I think this was one of those things where they were just like, we're not going to be alive to deal with it, so it's not our problem.
Fuck it.
Fuck it.
Their own fucking pile. Their fucking idea pile.
So 2099 era of comics really does embody this 90s grunge era. You see, this was coming around the time that Marvel was considering doing Heroes Reborn. I think it overlapped at one period, but
this was 94. Heroes Reborn was 96, and yeah. So they would still be going.
Yeah, so this is just around the time that it's happening because Marvel wants to go grungier. Marvel wants to go more hardcore. They want to push the ratings, and what they started to realize at the time was that they can't do that without pushing off some fans of classic characters, which is what will eventually lead to Heroes Reborn. But what was great about 2099 was it allowed them to do that, but completely reimagine them, allow a new team of artists and writers to come in and basically give them like free reign to do what they wanted. So this way, even if it didn't work out, they could scrap it. It wasn't treated as main continuity. It would take about 4 or 5 years for it to basically be adopted, and it would primarily be through Spider-Man. But we had Hulk 2099, Doom 2099, Spider-Man.
That was the one that, for whatever reason, I ran with the longest. I have like almost every of the first like 25 issues of that Doom 2099 run. At one point, even Warren Ellis actually took over that book at one point. I think he only did a few issues, but
yeah, there was one.
They took it seriously, is the point. Because look, this book is by Peter David. Like they were not just like tossing this to the side and saying fuck it. They were actually putting some of their top writers on it.
Yeah, and they had X-Men 2099. Eventually, later, they would have the Avengers, but they would be like side characters within other comic books. But, I mean, they had one book that I did a very early Patreon episode on called Ravage 2099, and he was a new character. He was basically like a Snake Plissken, Escape from New York.
He was literally just Snake Plissken.
He was just literally, Kurt Russell. So, like, this
did we do a show on that? I feel like
I did one way back because I got like a whole bunch of issues for like $5 at a Comic-Con, and I was like, I'll do one on it. And it was
fucking pile.
Yeah, it was their fucking pile. And I was just like, I'll take it, sure. And I ended up giving it away to a friend's kid because I was like, I think you might enjoy this more than me because it was just a bit. It wasn't my cup of tea. I thought I would love it, but it was more like, you enjoy this so I can go get other books I like and not have to worry about storing it. But I've always enjoyed this, and the older I have become over the years, the more I actually appreciate 2099 because it was this promise to readers that this is going to be its own canon. It's not going to distort anything from the current mainline Marvel, but it's gonna just be wacky, crazy future cyberpunk shit. And they have always done that. In fact, I in the Second Print Comics fan zone, I went ahead and talked about a stack of books I got last week. I talked about on last week's Pop episode. And currently Marvel has a Spider-Man 2099 limited series out right now called Spider-Man 2099 Dark Genesis. And as somebody that loves Spider-Man, as longtime listeners know, I am not happy with this current Amazing Spider-Man run. This is like a blast from the past. Immediately, I felt like I was a teenager again. It was just so good. Spider-Man 2099 Dark Genesis on stands right now. There are plenty of copies at my comic shop because Marvel isn't promoting it, which I think is ridiculous because you thought you'd want to go ahead and promote Miguel O'Hara as the Across the Spider-Verse movie is out. But Marvel isn't known for their smart decisions recently.
Not so much. Not so
So,
much.
Mark, you collected the Hulk one.
Not the Hulk. I did Doom, and I think I did a little bit of the Spidey, and what else? Maybe the X-Men. I had a few issues of the X-Men.
What was what was your initial reaction, because you were collecting around this time? What are your memories?
Well, here's the thing, Remso. My memories are always fond because I think I just loved everything when I was like 13, 14. I didn't have much of a critical mind. I don't think I was just sort of accepting everything I read as what it is. I didn't think too deeply about it. I didn't have the sometimes cynical view that I might take now towards certain books. So to me, it was just more books. I think that's what it was. And I've said this before. I think what always would suck me in, though, to jump onto a new series is that I loved a new number one, and I loved feeling like I was on the ride from a number one, like through an extended run of a series. So that's why I think I did try a number of the 2099 books and to continue with them for a long time, because maybe it wasn't better or worse, I don't know, than other books I was reading, but there was something about like, oh, I could like, I'm right now at the same time I was probably reading Peter David's Hulk around this time, somewhere in the 400s, and there was nothing. I knew I could never own every issue of the Hulk, but I knew if I started now, maybe I would own every issue of, say, Thunderstrike, or in this case, Doom 2099. So I think that was the appeal more than anything else. It was that it was a not a contained universe. It did connect to our current universe, but contained in a way that it was away from it. So, I didn't do this, but you could easily have just followed the 4 or 5 titles and just like felt like you had a whole universe. Whereas you could never really do that with all the Marvel titles, where there's probably 30, 40, 50 titles every month at a time. But you could collect an entire catalog of the Doom 2099 books. This was not Doom, but the 2099 books in general. Yeah. This is kind of why I liked Valiant too, because it was similar in the sense that it was a small universe. So yeah, there was like 4 or 5 books, but you could follow them all, and then you feel like you have the whole scope of that particular universe. So that I think was probably the appeal for me, just having a new little pocket universe, so to speak, that I could sort of call my own.
Yeah, and I mean, this was in some ways it was a better business decision than, let's say, what they did with Ultimate Comics. Now, that's not entirely fair, because Ultimate Comics sold more. They were the top selling books for Marvel for over a decade, and their impact is still felt throughout the MCU and everything else. But Marvel, when they did the Ultimate books, they were way more criticized than what they did with the 2099 books. Now, the 2099 books were a safe bet. You could put new writers, new artists on them. You didn't have to overcommit too much. And it was really for that specific crowd of comic readers that are going to look at this and they're going to think Blade Runner. They're going to think of the video games they're playing, the cool stuff in sci-fi that's going on, that cyberpunk type theme. So you can kind of keep it in a corner, and it wasn't going to mess with anything else, and it wasn't going to confuse anybody. Whereas
it's like the Funko pile. You could throw it in the corner, not worry about it. It's going to be not going to harm anyone, but you can go and visit that universe whenever you want.
Yeah, and there was never any attempt to like replace characters. Like, there was no way that they were ever going to prioritize the 2099 X-Men, who were actually pretty unpopular compared to like the actual X-Men, or that with Spider-Man. Whereas with people with the Marvel comics, they almost, fans felt at certain times that Marvel was over prioritizing the Ultimate books over mainline books in terms of talent and marketing and everything else. So like a lot of people who you would assume would probably criticize this, they didn't. Whereas when it came out later, Marvel thought that they could pull the same thing, because they were like, well, they like 2099. But yeah, it's like, also remember, the same people complained about Heroes Reborn, because they tried to basically create their own Ultimate universe at that point too. So, this is something that I think a lot of people just have fond memories of, and the people that don't are people that just didn't read it, because I've never met anybody that disliked the 2099 universe. But it's even weird to call a universe. It was just future Marvel. That was basically it.
I don't know how much has there been much crossover of have there been like 2099 characters that have come and crossed over with the main universe characters? I haven't read
primarily just Miguel O'Hara.
Spiderverse type stuff.
Yeah, not really the others. Miguel O'Hara is the only one who has regularly come into contact. At one point in the mid 2010s, Miguel O'Hara got trapped in the main MCU. I'm sorry, the main Marvel universe, the 616 verse, because of something going on in the Superior Spider-Man books, where he was basically pulled out of time and he was trying to stop the creation of a new Alchemax. And he was in the main Marvel universe for like 3-4 years before he got sent back.
Or the main timeline.
Yeah,
or
the main
time period or whatever.
Yeah, so he got sent back to his past, and he was there for like 3 years, and it was a cool book. Like I really enjoyed it. But yeah, I mean, it's primarily just Miguel O'Hara, because a lot of the other characters, a lot of the writers and artists, they just didn't know what to do with them. And while there was like a time crisis event or something in Marvel, it's always been treated as like smaller stuff. Like it's not really going to affect any of the titles. You're not going to have any cross title events. But if you like 2099 stuff, there will be a limited series here and there to do it. Oh, my second favorite title was Punisher 2099. That was wild.
That one I haven't read.
That one is hard.
Let me guess. He kills people with lasers.
He kills people with lasers.
Instead of missiles, or instead of, everything else.
Yeah, with lasers. Well, enough of that. Let's go ahead and jump into this first issue. I want to preface that unlike a lot of Marvel origin stories, they took a chance with this one. They went ahead and spread this across the first 3 issues of 2099. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cover issue 1. And I challenge readers that if you enjoy this, go ahead and read issues 2 and 3 on your own to get the full origin story. But I think this first issue kind of gives you a really nice taste of what we're dealing with.
SPC homework. That's what it's come down to.
Mm-hmm. The SPC Book Club is asking you to do some reading. Well, Spider-Man 2099. First off, I want to go ahead and look at this cover. This was a Spider-Man that did not look like Spider-Man.
The cover was badass. It stood out to me. I remember this from being a kid. Like this one really stuck out. You're like, oh, Spider-Man. That's not shit. That's fucking cool.
I think in the marketing they said he's Spider-Man, but he's not your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
He's definitely not friendly neighborhood. It almost looks like he has like a Punisher-esque skull in the spider there on his outfit.
Yeah. Just right there. They were really trying to solidify that this ain't Peter Parker and this is not your daddy Spider-Man. And I'm trying to find the art page and stuff. This was
Peter David and Rick Leonardi.
Yeah, people that SPC listeners should definitely be well aware of. This also had this was the DeFalco era of Marvel when Tom DeFalco was editor-in-chief.
By the way, wrote Thunderstrike. He also was writing Fantastic Four at the time when I was reading it, and about 20 other Marvel books. And Tom DeFalco's like one of these guys where I don't think I've ever read a Tom DeFalco book where I was blown away, but I've also never read one that I thought was terrible. He's just like a steady hand.
That's exactly what I was
need someone to write 20 books because you got to put the books out, put DeFalco on it. He'll put a story out. It won't be horrible. You're not going to love it.
Yeah, he succeeded Jim Shooter in the late 80s, and he really maintained like that era of Marvel where you had a good consistency in storytelling, but he was also pushing stuff like this. And I don't know if he was editor-in-chief at the time when Marvel was doing Heroes Reborn, but I mean, he was there during a good amount of change. So, yeah, I mean, he was there for Infinity Gauntlet and a bunch of the other big books that we've done. Yeah, he's a good steady
Clone Wars, Maximum Carnage, everything 90s, Tom DeFalco pretty much oversaw in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. So we go ahead and open the first page to New York in the year 2099. And right here, for millennials, the best way I could describe this is this looks like Neo Gotham from Batman Beyond. I think the creators of Batman Beyond would actually credit Marvel's 2099 with influencing Batman Beyond. So you're going to see some of that similarity if you look at it. So if it's a chicken or the egg scenario, 2099, and then sometime later, Batman Beyond. So we see flying cars. We see this Alchemex corporation plastered everywhere. It looks kind of like Blade Runner, that whole type of thing. And then out of nowhere, you go on to the second page. It's this giant splash page. And this is one of the coolest splash pages ever. You see our new 2099 Spider-Man running from these hover cops, and they just went ahead and leapt over, these teenagers who were in their hover car. And just right there, I mean, that just gives you everything. This is the future. This is a rogue Spider-Man. This guy looks scary as hell. Why is he on the run from the cops? And they're yelling at him. They're trying to arrest him. Just right here, with the web cape, with everything, just as we mentioned earlier, this is a badass motherfucking Spider-Man.
Indeed. Yeah, and it's like I don't know. I feel like every future type book, the future sort of looks the same. So, I won't give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's just a generic future. So it's really, where are you going to take me in this story? This is what's going to matter here.
Yeah. So the next couple pages, 3 through 4, you see the hover cops. They're struggling to deal with this guy. He's a superhuman, and what's crazy is like, Spider-Man moves and looks a certain way, and to the credit of Todd McFarlane, this was this was a Spider-Man that looked and moved like his Spider-Man. Todd McFarlane. I'm sorry, Todd McFarlane, not Tom. I was thinking of the comedian Todd
Oh, I
McFarlane.
thought it was Todd's younger brother.
No, bud, that's not
I was
how
just
it's
going to let you
done.
run with it.
Yeah, so Todd McFarlane, I mean, the way that he moves, the way
Bro,
that he kind of does things, this is a different type of movement. And I want to preface that because you see this as the story continues. And I think it's done very intentionally because they want to preface that this is a very different Spider-Man. Whereas after Todd McFarlane, and he has influenced how Spidey looks and moves in movies, animation, video games, he moves like a spider. This Spider-Man moves like a freaking ninja. He's just as acrobatic. He's just as agile, but everything he does looks like he's going to make a move that can like attack somebody. Like this is definitely an offensive Spider-Man. So he's getting away. He jumps on this one guy's hover bike and he's just like throwing people around. And then what's wild is on what page number is this? On page 6, you see something which is definitely not very friendly of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He basically has these claws and he scratches, he like smacks, I mean, discipline hand, like open hand, like claw slashes this one cop's helmet off. And the guy is screaming. You can tell they cut him. And you look at his hands and you're like, Spider-Man has fucking claws? This Spider-Man does. And it is just so crazy. So he crashes his bike. He's continuing to, jump away. What you can also notice is that he's not swinging with webs yet. So as of right now, we're kind of in the middle of the story. This is a non-linear origin story, which I also think was really cool because it also juxtaposes Peter Parker's origin, which is very linear. So I like it done in this fashion. It's kind of like the first issue of Spawn, which is very non-linear. That's what kind of
you just
inspired a
did it
lot of
differently.
people.
I was about to say I like it when you say linear, and then you switched it up. You went back to linear, the real way it's pronounced.
What?
I didn't think. Linear is like it's like your issues episodes. You always say linear, and I probably just mostly laugh to myself about it and just let it go. But then right as I was about to make a joke about you saying linear instead of linear, you went and said linear. You don't even notice that you're doing it. Listeners notice.
I've never felt so self-conscious on air before.
Well, now you know how I feel every time I try to say episode or issue. It's going to live with you for the rest of your life. Now we
Tomato,
each have our own
tomato.
thing.
Okay.
All right. So anyway, get back to
Potato,
the
potato.
non-linear story.
Fuck it, we'll continue. So he
Fuck it, we're live.
he doesn't have the ability to swing webs yet. That will come into play later. So what you can tell very much is that even though he's in costume now, there's still some development to come.
And I like here too that you sort of learn some of his abilities and how he acts by what the people chasing him are doing. Like at one point he's just falling like in a straight free fall and they're like, oh, just let him fall, he'll die. And like, no, dummy, he's going to use his web things to make himself a net to land. Like, so they already know a little bit about Spider-Man 2099. And through their juxtaposition, we also get to learn as well as we see it happening.
Yeah. And as they continue, everything is Alchemex. So Alchemex is basically Amazon.
Yeah. Straight up.
So we get over to page 8 and we see that our Spider-Man of the future has been able to escape. He has switched back into civilian clothes, and as he's walking into his apartment, he's very sensitive to light, and this is going to matter in a little bit. I remember being very confused at the beginning when I read this years ago.
Yeah, I was like,
later on,
wait, do spiders hate light? What's going on?
yeah, I was like, what's up with this guy? So, I mean, you don't even see his face. He goes and sits down and he's talking basically to his Alexa, who is this hologram AI named Lila, who was modeled after Marilyn Monroe. So,
Not a bad choice.
yeah. So he's like, go ahead and, tell me my missed messages for the day. And each time a message comes up, it's the hologram of the person. So the first one that he gets is a message from Tyler Stone. He is the CEO of Alchemex. And basically, he is asking our hero, Miguel O'Hara, who his nickname is Mike, because God forbid white people call you by your actual name. He's like, Mike, I strongly suggest you come and see me so we can work something out. And Miguel is just like, fuck it, move on. So then you move on to a friend of his named Gabe, and Gabe is like, this.
These are all like his voicemails, by the way, which are displayed in the form of a holographic representation of the person leaving the message. It's I don't know if I want that in the future. I don't even want to hear the voicemails, let alone see the people.
Exactly. It just feels a little unnerving. So then we get his friend Gabe, and his friend Gabe is criticizing him about this project that he's on. And apparently they were in an argument, and Gabe is just calling, basically say, listen, like, I don't like what you're doing, but you're still my friend and I want to stay friends with you. And Miguel is just like not having it. He cuts it off and he's like, dump it and move on, Lila. So then he gets a hologram message from his girlfriend, Dana. And obviously something's going on between him and Dana, because Dana's like, Miguel, you're not talking to me. What's wrong? I'm worried about
Dana
you.
Got a black eye.
Yeah. So
if a yellow eye, I guess.
If they want to emphasize that, this ain't, Spider-Man would never hit Mary Jane or something like that. This is just continuing to double down on the fact that this is not Peter Parker. This is not Peter Parker.
Yeah, and they don't tell you exactly what happened, but you can, I mean, you can put it together and think, it at least brings up the question, wait, did this guy that we just met, that's the hero of did he hit his girlfriend? And I like it, the way they do this, they plant the little, when I say they, I mean Peter David. That's why they brought on a real good writer for this, who knows how to layer a story and sort of give you questions that you want to see the answers to, and slowly sort of unveil the answers as you go. So already, just in these couple of pages, we've had the mystery of why is this guy affected by the lights? We've had the mystery of what's the deal with this drug and this Tyler guy? We have the mystery of what the fuck happened to his girlfriend. I hope it's not what we think. And all of this in just a couple of pages of the sort of the answering machine scene, I guess, with the hollows. And I really thought this whole scene was a really effective way to sort of lay the groundwork for this character without just giving us giving it in the normal linear way. Here's everything happening in order. It makes you interested in what's going to happen. Instead of just flat out showing you, it makes you ask these questions to yourself. So then when you get the answers, it's like an aha moment instead of just having it all laid out there for you.
And what I love about the way that they write this is that none of the dialogue feels like it's expositional. Like, this is all just very like in the moment dialogue. Like, they're not going to give you too much just by the characters talking to each other. It's very show don't tell, as you mentioned. So he goes ahead and he turns off the message from Dana. He just doesn't want to deal with anything. Finally, we get a pretty good look at his face, and this guy just looks upset, pissed off, frustrated, angry. And Lila is like, "Listen, Miguel, your behavior is pretty stressed, as I can tell," to just kind of juxtapose it. I'm sorry, just kind of, summarize it. And what she recommends he do is that he goes ahead and enter in his journal, which she says, will help calm you down and put your thoughts in process and everything else. And apparently
this made me think about like the Hal scene from 2001 Space Odyssey. Just calm down, Hal. You need to take a stress pill. You need to write in your journal, Miguel.
So Miguel is like, my journal, huh? All right, Lila, journal mode then. Take this down. And now we're getting to the point where, he is basically going to discuss the last couple of days. So what we know is that this is a few days since he has become Spider-Man, basically. And, what we learn is that Miguel O'Hara is a geneticist for Alchemex, and he's working with this other scientist named Aaron. And what they're essentially trying to do is they're trying to create a form of super soldiers in a way. It comes a little bit later, but that's essentially what they're doing. More specifically, Miguel O'Hara is a giant fan of Spider-Man from way many years back. And he's like, his name was Spider-Man, one of the premier boys from the old heroic age from around the turn of the century. And he's talking about his powers and everything. And we see an old photo of Peter Parker Spider-Man. And what he basically...
This is where you hear the music in your head.
Yeah. So Miguel is basically a fan. And he's like, if we're going to do this, we're going to use the spider, DNA or whatever to try and make somebody who could be a Spider-Man, who could, potentially bring back that heroic age of Marvel heroes. And the guy is just like, I don't know about this, blah, 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 typical like corporate, does corporate like this bullshit? And eventually they go ahead and they bring in a guy who's gonna be kind of like the guinea pig on this. And Miguel is just like, dude, I don't know. This is crazy. I don't think this is ready for for human testing. We're kind of rushing this. And they're like, well, corporate wants it. Blah, blah, blah. So that continues. Eventually they put him in this chamber where they're gonna blast him with like this radioactivity mixed.
Can I just
with,
say,
yeah.
I love the line about this chamber, because he's saying, I love the design of this transformation chamber. Yeah, I got it off an old Hollow. The Fly, you like it? And it is the exact same looking type pod from the film The Fly. Remso, tell me you've seen The Fly.
I've seen The Fly with the guy from Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And the
He has a name,
apartments.com commercials. Yeah, Jeff Goldblum. Yeah.
You've seen that movie, right?
Yeah, I've seen that movie.
Okay. Have you seen The Fly 2?
I did not know there was
not
a Fly
starring
2.
Jeff Goldblum, starring Eric Bana. Because
No.
you know how he gets the girlfriend? She's pregnant at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Well, she has a baby, and it's Eric Bana, and it's Eric Bana, and it's weird. I recommend it someday.
I don't think so.
It's actually good. It's actually not bad. It's actually pretty good.
I just watched the Korean version of that movie, Old Boy, and I can't take drama right now.
I don't know any version of that movie.
Dude, I will send you something later.
All right.
Because if you want to feel like you have to take a hydrogen peroxide shower, this will
do that way every day.
Oh, okay. So they put him in the Fly chamber. Now I feel like I have to talk like Jeff Goldblum. Okay. So they go ahead and
the
put
impression
him
needs work, but I appreciate the efforts.
it was a spur of the moment. It was an on the fly thing. See what I did there? Right. So they stick him in there, they blast him with shit, and then they open it up, and he comes out like this giant freak mutant thing. He grabs Miguel, he's shaking him around as Miguel is screaming, and next thing you know, the guy just collapses and dies. And they're like, he's dead. He broke his restraints effortlessly in the accelerated strength scenario, but this is very, very positive, despite the fact that he's dead. Miguel is just like looking.
I love Tyler. I love to hate. But I love how Tyler's like, oh, well, this is actually a good thing because, he broke free. So if we can just solve this whole turning into the freakazoid part, then we're good. So yeah, chalk a W up.
Yeah. So Miguel is just like, I'm done. So he runs up to Stone's office. He throws his badge on there, and Stone is like, dude, you got to relax. How about you have a drink with me? 1994. This is from my private stock. It was a good year, which is a tease because that's when this would come out. And at that point, Miguel is just like, no, I said I'm gone. I quit. I'm not going to be part of another incident like today's. And even if you continue to work after I'm gone, at least I won't be any part of it. And Stone is like, come on, Miguel. Alchemax has groomed you, Mike, cared for you, educated you, just as we did your father. He was a brilliant man, your father. And Miguel's just like, you could bill me. I don't care. So he's pouring him a drink. He's trying to convince him to stay on. Alchemax is going to do something amazing. Typical corporate bad guy bullshit. And as he's enjoying his drink or whatever, Stone is just like, you like this? And he's like, yeah, it's pretty good. I feel more relaxed than ever. And Stone is like, yeah, that would probably be because of my parting gift, the rapture. And Miguel is just like, what? And Stone is like, yeah, the rapture in the wine, just the one that you drank. I'm sure you're familiar with it. A very high-powered, mind-expanding hallucinogen, perfectly legal, of course. A number of Alchemex employees are already users. And basically what he's done is he got him so overdosed on Rapture that now he's dependent on it. So
it doesn't even sound like it takes much. I mean, it's just the sip of this wine he took, but the way he lays it out is that once you have any, essentially, you are addicted to it in the sense that you need it. Your body starts to need it. It's almost like, it sounds like a heroin addiction, but maybe even worse. Like your withdrawal, and that now we're starting to get answers, even though they don't say it directly here. Now we're starting to understand, that thing with the lights, oh my god, it's because he took this Rapture and he's going through withdrawal. So I like the way that, again, Peter David doesn't just lay it all out. He raises questions. he gives you answers, but he also gives you answers in a way that he does let you still put things up, make some connect the dots yourself. He doesn't just lay it all out there for you. But if you're reading it and you're seeing the question and you're seeing this sort of flashback scene, it all comes together for you in a very natural way. It's the reason that I just love Peter David as a writer in general. It's a hallmark of his writing. He always makes things ultimately easy to understand, but gives you a little bit of a challenge on the way to get there instead of just plopping it down on the paper.
Yeah, and I mean, what's wild is that, um, with this, he reminds you of other Spider-Man villains. He's a Norman Osborn type. He's a Kingpin type. So it just kind of shows that, even though the time period may change, the way that the origin is done has changed, there's still this everlasting evil, and that the world will always need a Spider-Man. And that's what you kind of get through the title as it goes on. But basically, he's like, listen, you're addicted to Rapture. Eventually, you're going to go into withdrawal. And if you don't get more of it, you're going to die. But luckily, Alchemex is the only distributor of this. But it would suck if somehow you weren't allowed to buy any. So now he's basically an indentured servant. And Stone just doesn't give a fuck that he just did this to his lead geneticist. So Miguel goes home, and what he sees is that Dana and Lila are working out, and she's wearing her like Jane Fonda leg warmers and shit like that. It's so funny how like in the 90s, the future was like the 80s, but more cyberpunk. Yeah. And as she walks in and he's like, collapsing all over the place, she goes to see him, and all of a sudden he freaks out and he just backhands her, freaking out. He's like, get away. And again, she has the questions answered. Yeah. So he's like, shock, Dana, I didn't realize. I thought you were. And she's just freaking out. And at that point, she explains, listen, it's not me. My boss drugged me. And they have this, heart.
How was your day today, honey? Oh, my boss got me hooked on this this hallucinogenic that was going to affect me for the rest of my life.
Can you imagine Jeff Bezos drugging somebody? Because that's basically what this is.
He has. He's hooked all of us on Amazon.
Oh, wow. That got deep.
But it's true.
That got deep. So
look, if I need a pizza cutter, am I going to run around trying to find pizza cutters, or am I going to go to my little Bezos machine and get a pizza cutter in like a day?
True.
He's got me hooked. He's got me hooked on the addiction to the ease of use. Anyway.
So at this point, he's like, I don't know how to quit. And she's like, well, we can find ways. And it's just a stressful situation, because not only is he dealing with the unethical behavior, the projects that he's working on, but now he's also addicted to the shit. So what he decides to do is he's going to go ahead and try and override his body of the Rapture by reformatting the Spider-Man, genetic altering sequence that killed the other guy. And he's thinking maybe if he could perfect it, it will go ahead and rid his body of Rapture. But what's happening as he enters the freaking fly chamber is that guy, Aaron, comes in, and he's just like, you know what? Fuck you. For some reason, he's like, I'm fucking done with you.
Yeah, this part kind of confused me. I mean, they seem like they were like, I don't know, not the best of friends necessarily, but it was like suddenly he's trying to fucking kill this guy. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, suddenly he's like really jealous, and he's like, I'm not going to be under you, O'Hara. So he messes with the sequence to like overload it. And what this causes is the whole chamber to explode. And he thinks that he kills him as he steps up to see the rubble. And this scene kind of actually reminds me of the Green Goblin origin in the Spider-Man movie from 2002, in which he's coming out of the chamber. Obviously something went wrong, and Aaron is just like, what the fuck? He's looking at him, and now he's like walking over saying, I'm not taking the blame for this. You wrecked it. You did this. You're misusing company equipment and everything. And as he goes over to confront Miguel now, because now he's at the point where he's not even going to pretend that he didn't just try and kill his coworker, we see a full page of Miguel O'Hara. He has claw fingers, blank eyes, and fucking fangs. And then it just says, to be continued on the next issue. Next, Nothing Ventured. So we know that this is going to be a multi-part origin story. But just right here, this one issue from the beginning to the end, this is not your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Certainly not. It's definitely a lot more of an adult, not just the Spider-Man, but the book itself. It feels a lot more adult than a lot of the. Well, I guess maybe it is a hallmark of the '90s of things becoming a little more adult. But
Mhm.
just seeing, even if it turned out to be sort of an accident, just seeing like Miguel hit his woman and what have you, and get hooked on a drug and things like that.
This is not approved by the Comics Code Authority.
That probably was actually, but yeah, I mean it's one of those things where you would assume that a lot of this would be just kind of throwaway type stuff that's not worth returning to. But then you look at some of the writers they put on some of these books again. Warren Ellis had a run on Doom 2099. You got Peter David here. I mean, they really took this seriously, and it shows in the story, because this is not it's not a straightforward book. It's not a straightforward origin story. It's done in a very interesting way, and it's laid out in a way that, while from the beginning, you could easily come into this cynically saying, "Oh, it's just another Spider-Man," but really, it seems like, from what we've seen so far, the main similarity is that they're called Spider-Man. They're very different people in their personality. Their powers, while maybe similar, striking differences as well with the claws. And then on top of that, there's this added element, which I think is my favorite part of this whole thing, that he's addicted to this rapture drug. So that's like this interesting story that, even while you're getting the origin still laid out to you, it's always, you're like, how is he going to deal with this constantly? Because that this character is now addicted to this rapture. So you're thinking, is he going to constantly having to broker with this Tyler Stone guy? So there's all these layers to this story that are being put in there. What are his exact powers? So by the time we finish this first issue, like, you got some questions early on. You had some of them answered, but while questions are being answered, greater questions arise. So again, this is all really a hallmark of Peter David's storytelling. And I don't know. I feel maybe I'll just go right into my grades here, since I feel
let's
like
do it.
I'm already doing it anyway. So I was pleasantly surprised by this. I guess I shouldn't have been, because Peter David generally delivers. And I mean, at worst, you're going to get a decent story with Peter David. But this exceeded any expectations I had just from seeing his name on the book. Again, this is not, it's not, I'm not going to write my dad about this book, because it would be weird for him to get a letter from me about Spider-Man
That would be
2099.
kind of odd.
It'd
Yeah.
be a little strange. But besides that, it's a pretty damn good book, and it's a pretty interesting story, and it's a lot more interesting than I ever would have thought it would have been going in. So I'm going to give the writing a 4. I think the writing is just pretty darn good. The art, I would call, it's weird, because the art is by Rick Leonardi. Like, I would not call this like the best art ever, but for some reason, I really, really love this art, probably more than I should. And I'll tell you why. It feels so 90s. And I don't know how else to describe that, but just the art style, it's a little maybe messy at times, a little gritty, you might say.
It's like he's homaging his own version of like a Frank Miller.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that too. I mean, he's certainly no Frank Miller, but there is a little bit of that in his style for sure, and that really came across to me as well. That I just dug the art the whole time. So again, I'm not going to write my dad about the art either, but it's pretty darn good. So I'm also going to give the art a 4. That gives me an SPC score, for me anyway, of an 8 for this book. Pleasant surprise.
I have the exact same score as you for writing,
right.
and
finally,
art.
unlike last week, we're in sync.
Yeah, I mean, the writing. I mean, I think if we were covering all 3 issues of the origin, it might even be a little bit higher. That's kind of a tease for people to go and finish it. But I like it. It's show don't tell. It's dialogue that's in the moment instead of just being walking exposition. I like the contrast and how he's trying to make it seem like, yeah, this is Spider-Man, but this ain't Peter Parker. He ain't your friendly neighborhood webhead. And I mean, while this is pretty on par with a lot of the 90s, the image revolution style of artwork, it's a little bit, it's a little bit of Miller from the late 80s. It's a little bit of Todd McFarlane from his Spider-Man era and everything else. I think the fact that it's set in the future and they're really just embracing it, the environment and the characters match the artwork more so than if you had this in a mainstream Marvel book. So for that, I also gave it a 4 out of 5. So this gets a total score of 16 out of 20. Definitely add this to your reading list.
That's just on our very informal scale. I would say that's like just on the line between a high-end Sunday read and an actually excellent book. It's not quite
Yeah.
fully excellent, but it's a little better than, what you might just call a Sunday read.
Exactly. Exactly. So I mean, I actually think for fun, I'm just going to go ahead and read this. They've got I think it's the full run of this original title on Marvel Unlimited, but I'm
I'll at
telling
least
you,
finish these next two issues for sure.
yeah, I mean, I've read the Spider-Man 2099 from Marvel from like 2015. I'm reading the current Deadly Genesis. There were a few other before this I didn't know about, so I'm gonna go back and try and find those limited series. But I mean, Miguel O'Hara is just fun. And I mean, this whole 2099 era is just fun. 2099 Punisher is my favorite Punisher title. It's the Punisher of lasers. It's fucking cool.
I like how I've never read it and I know exactly how to describe it.
it's
Punisher with
it's
lasers.
it just fits. It's just really cool. And Doom 2099. If you've never thought you'd want to read a Doctor Doom comic, that's the one. That is the one.
I will actually be doing that for a case of the runs once I
That
finish
would
up
be
a couple
so
projects I'm
cool.
on.
That
Well,
would be
it's gonna
so
be.
cool.
Not would, it will be.
It will be so cool. Well,
You know what's
folks,
weird about Doom 2099? Not all of them are on the Marvel Unlimited app. There's like a big gap, and I wonder why that is.
they only have one issue of Punisher 2099. They only have one issue of Ravage 2099.
Strange, right?
Well, what this also shows me is that if you ever think, and I've kind of fallen into this lately, oh, I don't need to buy the physical collection or I don't need to buy the graphic novel, I'll just read it digitally. You don't always have that option.
Yeah, this is
There's
good
still,
evidence of it.
yeah, there's still a
So
virtue to doing that.
keep
To
that.
getting
That's
them.
good evidence that, look, I'm glad for whatever reason these books found their way into the fuck it pile. I'm glad they didn't find their way into the sold pile or the given away pile, because look, now same thing with Thunderstrike. I think all these Thunderstrike issues are not on the app as well, but for whatever reason, I think between the ones I physically have and a little bit of what's on the app, I can read almost not. I don't know if I'm going to read all this Thunderstrike run, but I do plan to go back to the Doom 2999 run. That one, for whatever reason, and again, I don't know, maybe it's my childhood memory. I remember really actually liking that the most. Like I remember thinking that was my favorite book at the time
Wow.
for a little while. Maybe it might partially be because I was a big Fantastic Four fan, and it was interesting to see, because there's a spoiler alert for Doom 2099. It's still Victor Von Doom. It's not a different Doctor Doom. So you are seeing, so it's a character I did actually already know. So I found it interesting to see that same character like 100 plus years in the future, and then kind of more positioned as, he's not a hero per se, but he's the titular character of the book. To some extent, he's the protagonist, I should say, even though he's not very heroic necessarily. But there are shades of gray. Anyway, I'm getting excited about Doom 2999 just talking about it. So that'll be a project of mine again. All the patrons will be able to hear our bonus shows, such as the Remso Rants, Remso versus the everything, the MCU, the DCEU, etc., etc. You got the case of the runs from me, Tales from the Fuck Up Pile, where I will be digging into again. Boy, if this Thunderstrike book doesn't excite you, I don't know what's going to, but I'm reading it this afternoon.
Nice. All that and more. Patreon.com/secondprintpod. And please, we love seeing your 5-star rating and reviews. The people that leave less than that can go fuck yourselves. We'll go ahead and read your reviews off on the show. We always get a good wave of people during the summer, which is always really exciting. We do this for you. We tailor the content for you. And, this is just one of those moments where it just so happens to coincide with Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse. I won't spoil much now. I'll do a spoilery review in about a week or so. But if you like Miguel O'Hara in the comics, the one thing I can say is you get it in the movie. It does not disappoint. So as always,
and I will say, just as an aside to that, I hadn't thought about Spider-Man 2099 in so long until I saw Into the Spider-Verse, where in the post-credit scene you do see Miguel O'Hara 2099 Spider-Man, and I remember I literally went, yeah, I didn't even mean to. So I must have fond memories of this book in this character, because the memory might be nothing more than just remembering this cool cover that we look at today, because I definitely own that book. And I wonder if that will be valuable, because that's not in my fucking pile. That's in my real book.
I own 2 copies of this. One that I've always intended on selling, and then one I always want to keep for myself. So I don't have many comics where I have 2 copies of the same issue, but I have 2 copies of this.
Just those and the Wonder Woman 1984 DVD, huh?
And with all the special commentary. All right, folks. That's about it. And remember, if nothing more, it's short, it's sweet, it's simple, it's spectacular, ultimate. It's a web of awesome. Read comics and change
change
the
the world.
world. Good night, America.
Adios.